on a special edition of Brian Ross Investigates. President Trump was roundly criticized and mocked for his suggestion that Americans should ingest bleach as a way to treat the coronavirus.
Experts called the idea a stroke of genius, minus the of genius part.
Is there a way we can do something like that by injection?
But meet the man who was full of praise for the president's words.
I pray for you all the time. You are doing a good job cleaning the swamp.
Mark Grenon is a self-proclaimed bishop who's been peddling bleach solutions to unsuspecting followers for years, claiming it can cure cancer, autism, and now COVID-19. Plus, who's Zooming who? The whole country is on Zoom for online business meetings, school classes, family reunions, and cocktail parties. We'll talk with the internet sleuths who discovered giant security holes in the Zoom app. Who's listening in as you share drinks with friends during social distancing? Plus, your questions about COVID-19 and the law, your job, your home, your rights.
We'd like to know what rights we have.
What do you suggest we do?
From the Law&Crime Network, this is a special COVID-19 edition of Brian Ross Investigates. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Brian Ross, and this is a special report from the Law&Crime Network and for our viewers on YouTube Live and Facebook Live, COVID-19 and the Law. And I'm joined today by my colleague at Law&Crime, investigative reporter Rhonda Schwartz. And Rhonda, we passed a grim milestone in the country today. 1 million cases now of people infected by the COVID-19, the coronavirus. And that has meant much of the country remains on lockdown, although some states are opening up. We're still pretty much at home and coming to depend more and more on what's going on in terms of getting our food and our packages delivered. Lots of questions now, Rhonda, about Amazon.
Well, there's probably no company that's more essential. Everyone at home is ordering Amazon online. But this week, the New York State Attorney General has opened an investigation into Amazon, alleging health and safety practices are not adequate in their New York plants, and further saying she's going to investigate a chilling effect that workers are being retaliated against for speaking out about safety practices.
Indeed, the owner of, or the lead stockholder of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, one of the richest, if not the richest man in America, has now taken charge of the company. But around the country, we're hearing complaints from employees at Amazon, all carried on local news this week.
Hundreds of Amazon warehouse workers across this country are threatening a mass call out to protest what they say is a lack of coronavirus protections.
A mass sick-out planned for today, with more than 300 workers expected to participate from around the country.
You're not really doing social distancing. There's about 500 to 600 people in the building on a daily basis.
The company has said previously that it has stepped up the cleaning of its work sites, started taking employees' temperatures, and supplied them with protective face masks.
The workers are reportedly demanding that the company immediately close down any facilities where positive cases of the virus have been confirmed and to provide 2 weeks' pay and testing to workers at those locations.
Going into work kind of scares me because we have a silent killer inside of our job, and Amazon is not taking the proper precautions to slow the spread or even stop the spread.
I have to do this. I can't not pay my bills and live my life. But then it was just really uneasy knowing that I could possibly contract COVID-19 while at work and either become ill or even possibly die from it.
Workers have that difficult choice of like, do I go to work or do I and risk it, or do I have no money, basically.
So, Rhonda, what does Amazon say about all of these complaints from workers and the New York State Attorney General investigation?
Well, Amazon did not respond to our invitation to appear on the program, but they're posting daily updates on their website. They say they have done everything necessary to keep workers safe in the warehouse, and they've increased wages, they've added more paid sick leave if you get COVID, and Jeff Bezos himself has personally donated $100 million to food banks. And the around the country, there's, oh, sorry, Brian, go ahead.
No, you go finish up, Rhonda.
Just going to say that they're hiring for 100,000, they're advertising for 100,000 new jobs. So there's a lot of work out there for Amazon and for those workers.
Yes, but lots of questions. And let's get to our legal panel to talk about the issue at Amazon and other large companies still trying to carry out their business. We're joined now by Luigi Izzo of the Berman Law Group and Angela Roddick-Wright of the Roddick Law Group. Let me start with you, Angela. What do you make of these Amazon workers, and do they have a legal case at some point?
Well, it's really a catch-22 situation. As Rhonda indicated, individuals need to work, and the public, we rely on Amazon for so much. So certainly we want Amazon to keep operating, but we also want them to make sure across the board, we know they have so many warehouses, but that they are taking a unified approach across the board to protect their workers, to honor social distancing requirements, to provide the workers with the protective equipment that they need in order to feel safe and protected at work. So do these employees have a claim? Possibly they do, especially if there's evidence that there's been retaliation in response to certain employees stepping up and leading the call for protection of workers. So there are possibly definite legal claims that can arise out of this. But I'm personally hoping that Amazon will continue to step up and do the right thing and protect their workers.
Well, Luigi Izzo, let me ask you, one employee up against a big multi-hundred-billion-dollar corporation, do they have a chance even in court against Amazon or companies like that?
Well, first off, the federal government gives stronger protections to whistleblowers. Obviously, the government knows that the employees are their eyes and ears on the ground. And obviously, just hence like the term whistleblower, they need to blow a whistle. If somebody does blow a whistle with those stronger protections, and if Amazon, these allegations are true against Amazon, there could be cases brought into federal court in front of a federal judge, and there could be stringent consequences and damages brought. I mean, it can even be like a mass action. And what I'm hearing, there are several hundred employees. This isn't even just one individual. But technically, the reason why the federal government gives a stronger protection to whistleblowers is that, quite frankly, yes, a huge corporation can threaten you with your job, can, have your human resource file, add things, have write-up complaints, wrongful terminations. There's all kinds of circumstances. But what employees need to know is that there are stronger protections for you. If you do seek legal counsel, there are laws out there that can protect you to stop them from retaliating. And if it's found out that they did retaliate, there could be stringent damages that they would have to pay the employee as well as the class if there's a class brought.
Okay, Luigi. Angela, a question for you from Rhonda Schwartz.
So, Angela, if you are one of those workers who has spoken out and you're fired, what should be your next steps? What are the rights for the average worker in this situation?
That employee should first make a complaint to Human Resources so that Human Resources can initiate an immediate investigation and try to remedy the situation. If the employee has already been terminated, as you indicated, that employee should seek legal counsel so they can be sure to receive good advice about how to pursue their claim and the benefits of pursuing a claim or the possible challenges in pursuing a claim. And certainly they can reach out to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, also called the EEOC, to file a complaint and request that the EEOC investigate. And each state has an equivalent organization to the EEOC. In California, for example, we have the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing, and individuals in California can also file a complaint with that state agency, and it's the same throughout the states, requesting that that organization or that agency investigate and look into the complaint. But I think getting good quality legal counsel on the front end may help employees and individuals to navigate and to know the best course of action for their particular claim.
All right, and Luigi, here's a question a little bit different from one of our viewers. According to reports, some employees are actually going to make more money on unemployment and with the government's stimulus check than they would have been if they're working. Do you think that's fair? Our viewer asks.
Well, it's hard to say what's fair. I mean, you have people in a situation right now that even their paychecks probably wouldn't carry them as far. I believe that the governments are giving extra money they're making a couple of extra dollars. I don't think it would be so significantly more, but and at this time, I think it's probably necessary. What scares me is that if they extend it, say that we're in July, we're in August, and they're extending unemployment benefits, and these jobs are trying to get these employees back. But if they were making $500 a week working, and now they're making $900 on unemployment, what would be the incentive for an employee to come back? So I think that's where we're going to start having issues.
Indeed. And Angela, in fact, the Wall Street Journal is reporting today that some employers are already having trouble trying to find enough people to come back to work because of all the benefits they're getting out of work. What do you make of that, Angela?
Yes, it is definitely a glitch in the system. And in fact, whether it be related to the Payroll Protection Act or unemployment, things happen so quickly. These laws came out and the expansions of unemployment benefits and sick leave and so many other benefits happened so fast that the agencies that are processing these claims have not caught up. And so when it comes to unemployment, and it was reported in the LA Times today as well, that many employees don't have an incentive to go back. But the problem is the unemployment will eventually run out and employees will need to return to work and will want to return to work. So hopefully we can find that balance and that employers will be in a good position to hire individuals and to rehire individuals when all of this ends.
All right. Well, after a break, we're going to continue with more of your questions for our panel of legal experts. Plus, we're going to meet the man who claims he's a bishop and has been offering commercial bleach as a cure for autism, cancer, and now COVID-19, and he's praising President Trump. You're watching the Law and Crime Network. And welcome back. We continue with our special report here on the Law and Crime Network, COVID-19 and the Law. Joined today by my colleague at Law and Crime, Rhonda Schwartz, and two preeminent employment lawyers, Luigi Izzo of the Berman Law Group and Angela Reddock Wright of the Reddock Law Group. Let's take a look, all of you, at a question sent in by one of our viewers about someone who's been required to do work that hardly seems essential.
My question has to do with essential workers. Outside the medical industry and law enforcement and government employees, I have a family member that works for a communications company here in New York, and they're doing installs opposed to much needed repair work that needs to be done. Now, I could understand if the installs are for a medical facility or some kind of treatment center, but if it's not for something that's essential, how do you send an employee into a burning building, so to speak, for profit?
Luigi, what do you make of that? Sending somebody into a burning building for when it's not essential is how this viewer put it.
Well, essential is dictated by New York State, and there's definitely guidelines. It seems weird when you tell someone, I'm getting new cable, and they're saying, well, is that essential? Well, obviously, healthcare is essential, pharmacies, grocery stores, that's kind of common sense. But telecommunication is as well, just like power lines. Telecommunications is an essential business right now. Picture if you had a huge group of people that didn't have cable, didn't have a way of communicating, weren't able to get local government news, state news, or federal government guidelines. We would have a bunch of people walking around with not knowing what to do. So telecommunications is essential, even though it doesn't seem like it on its face. Someone getting new cable or high-speed internet, to that sense, wouldn't seem to like the average person that's essential. But when you start looking down deeper into what essential really means, and communication would probably be one of the most essential things that, especially in this type of atmosphere we have today, is communication, what we need to do next. And it's going to take more than just one entity to do it. We have to do it as a group. And as a group, we all need to have communication and get that information as quickly as possible. So telecommunications is definitely essential. Now, to the part of sending someone into a non-essential thing, like someone coming into, pave your driveway at this time with 20 employees, obviously that would be a horribly wrong thing to do. You're jeopardizing people. But in this case with telecommunications, this wouldn't fall under that situation.
All right. Angela Reddock, right. Let me follow up with a question from a viewer. What is the requirement, as we're going back to work more and more now, for an employer to provide you with protective equipment?
Well, there is a strong requirement that every employer, whether they're essential, have essential employees or an essential industry or non-essential, that once people return to work, that that employer create a safe environment, one that's free of hazards and one that limits the exposure of employees to COVID-19 or any other potential virus or germs or what have you. So employers in this situation will have a heightened responsibility to ensure that they are cleaning their environments, that they're special sanitizing, that they are requiring employees to distance themselves appropriately, and that they create workstations that are distanced, and that they honor all of the state and federal laws that exist to try protecting employees during this time. And so again, I say it will be a heightened requirement and one that employers must take seriously.
All right, Luigi, let me ask you this follow-up question. This is a whole new world here with this COVID-19, the coronavirus, for employers. They don't really know how to deal with this. Is it fair to expect them to have to defend lawsuits even after everyone comes back to work, or should we just kind of forget it, as some people in the Trump White House have suggested?
Absolutely not. We can't forget our civil rights. If individuals feel they were violated and they have justification for it, obviously there's an obligation up to attorneys to have a fiduciary duty to actually bring a lawsuit that has a reasonable backing behind it. You can't just walk into a court and file a document that's frivolous. That would be wrong on the attorney. If we have the attorneys really looking into the claims that these individuals are making, and there is some reasonable grounds to bring these actions, we can't just forego those actions. Also, back to not being able to hold employers as maybe having the capability of knowledge of how to deal with this stuff. That's where the federal government, local government, and state governments need to come in, especially now that they want to reopen. They need to speak with one voice. They need to give guidance, and they need to have a set plan, and they need to make sure that they're disseminating that to all these employers in all different fields. Because if you have one industry doing it one way, another industry doing it another, and another employer, quite frankly, like Amazon, we just spoke about earlier, thinking they could do it their way, we're going to have big issues. So we need the government to come out with one voice, give clear guidance on how we need to proceed opening up, and we need to also rely on the justice industry and the lawyers making sure that they're not bringing frivolous lawsuits and bringing just claims that are justified.
That's right. It seems like there really aren't any standards that apply nationwide. Angela, a question for you from Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda?
Well, we've seen lines outside unemployment offices, people who say they've called 1,000 times and they can't get through. We're hearing a lot from our viewers who want to know, do my rights to collect unemployment, to get those benefits, if I can't get through and it takes weeks, months, am I still protected? Will I get those checks later? Will I get my benefits later if there's a big delay?
Yes, that is really an unfortunate situation that still the unemployment offices are backed up, and so many people who've been out of work for weeks now still are not receiving their unemployment. The unemployment offices have not stated for sure, but no, you will not lose your right to collect unemployment. The expanded unemployment benefits under the Federal Stimulus Act go back to January 27, 2020. So if you were unemployed as of that date, you should be, or that your hours were reduced as of that date, you should be able to claim unemployment benefits back to that date. And they extend through July 31st of this year. They have not been extended beyond that so far, but it's possible, I anticipate in a third or fourth stimulus bill, that the unemployment benefits may even be extended as well. So continue calling, continue trying to get in on the website until you get through. You eventually will get through, but it unfortunately may take some time.
All right. And finally, let me ask both you, Luigi and Angela, what kind of issues are you hearing from clients and new clients? Luigi?
We're getting a lot of calls from employees that are fearful that in the beginning of this whole situation with Corona, we're told not to wear masks. And for several weeks, we did not wear, especially in the healthcare fields where doctors were advising people that work the front desk, they're not doctors and nurses, are just secretaries, and they're on the front lines, and they felt that people were coming into their facilities, seeing someone wearing a mask would have that person walk right out the door. And now these people are tested positive with corona, and a lot of their family members have become ill, and even some have passed away. So there's a lot of concerns about what we can do and help them against those employers. I'm hearing things from where people were tested positive with corona, and they came out publicly to their employer, told the employer to actually disseminate it to the rest of the employees because it's the right thing to do. They want to keep people safe. Quarantined for 2-3 weeks, got the okay to go back to work, and then the first day back, they're told they're reducing their work staff, and they're the first one to go, and they believe it's because they were scared to have them back even though they were cleared by doctors. So we're hearing a lot of different stories, and a lot of it now is about getting back to work and what employers have done a couple of weeks earlier to the lack of protection, and that's really where we're at this point.
And Angela, with 30 seconds, what are you hearing from clients and new clients?
Brian, I'm hearing similar things as Luigi, but in my day-to-day work, I'm actually a mediator and a neutral. And what I am hearing is that employers and employees are concerned about what is for sure to be a backlog in the court system, where cases have been put on hold since this pandemic started. And we're not sure when the courts are going to open back up in full, which means cases that were scheduled for trial will go into 2021 and 2022. So employers and employees are really trying to figure out how to resolve their existing cases and what any future cases are going to look like. And so as a mediator, we say, give us a call and we'll help you resolve your cases outside of the court system. But folks are really concerned about the impact this has had on the court system.
Absolutely. Well, Angela Reddock and Luigi Izzo, thank you so much for joining us today to take on these questions, and we'll continue to have you come back and answer the questions of our viewers. Coming up, we're going to meet the man who calls himself a bishop in his own church. He's been peddling commercial bleach for years to people, claiming it cures autism, cancer, and now COVID-19, and he's praising President Trump. When we come back, you're watching the Law&Crime Network. And we're back, turning now to President Trump's astounding comments last week that Americans, he suggested, might want to ingest some kind of bleach as a cure to COVID-19, suggestions that were roundly criticized and mocked.
And then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning, because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number in the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me.
But it turns out not everybody was condemning President Trump, including a man who calls himself a bishop of the so-called Genesis 2 church, his own church. For years, he's been selling a kind of commercial or industrial bleach as a possible miracle cure for autism, cancer, and now COVID-19. His name is Mark Grenon, and he has his radio show where he revealed that he wrote a letter to President Trump and urged him to suggest that bleach be used as a cure for COVID-19.
Dear Mr. President, sir, I pray that this letter gets to you and finds you well. I am praying you read this letter and intervene and look into the FDA attacking our church and its sacraments by calling them fraudulent. There is so much evidence proving it is a wonderful detox through oxidation that can kill 99% of the pathogens in the body. That is why we have so many testimonies. I pray for you all the time. You are doing a good job cleaning the swamp. The FDA and CDC are the swamp rats. If the FDA and FTC get away with attacking our church sacraments, then you will lose your election that I want you to win. Churches will not tolerate their religious rights taken away. You know the First Amendment, and no law can be made to go against the free exercise of our church's beliefs. Please get rid of Dr. Fauci and Gates' influence in your administration. May the Lord God bless you, sir. Bishop Mark S. Grenon.
The so-called Bishop Mark Grenon, who is praising President Trump because Grenon himself has been urging unsuspecting people to take this miracle cure, a kind of commercial bleach, to cure all kinds of diseases and illnesses, something the FDA is now trying to crack down on. This story was broken by a reporter for the Guardian newspaper, Ed Pilkington, who I talked to earlier today. Ed, thanks so much for joining us. Do you think it's possible that President Trump somehow got word from the so-called Bishop, Mark Grenon, about this bleach, the MMS?
Well, we know that by so-called Archbishop Grenon's own words, he wrote to President Trump probably about 5 or 6 days before Trump made his extraordinary comments about disinfectant. And not only did Mark Grenon say that he had written to the president, he said that 20 or 30 of his supporters had also written to the White House. Now, I need to stress that we don't have a smoking gun here. We don't know for certain whether Trump received and read any of those letters, but it kind of points us towards a possible contact between these extremist individuals who passionately believe either in the ability of bleach to cure all illnesses, or passionately believe in the ability to make money out of spreading such a belief, which is what I think Mark Grenon is up to. And there are other connections too. We may want to go on and talk about Alan Keyes, but it is certainly true, I think, that information was passed from bleach extremists to the White House just days before Donald Trump made his controversial remarks. And for me, that's enough to warrant further probing and to warrant some answers from the White House, who didn't reply to my journalistic inquiries.
You and I have both been following the Genesis 2 Church and Grenon for some time now. It's amazing that he is still in business, still operating after all the exposés about his real snake oil, selling bleach to try to cure autism or cancer, really poisoning children.
Yes, we're in a very elite club here, I think, of those who pay close attention to these bleach extremists. I wish it was, confined to just a few of us, because the problem is that I think there are many thousands of people who on social media are keeping a close eye on what the Genesis 2 Church is doing, but from a rather different perspective than us, which is that they actually believe this stuff. They believe what they're told by Genesis 2, which is that, that industrial bleach that is used in the textile manufacturing process can cure 99% of all illnesses, including cancer, including malaria. I've exposed stories about people selling bleach to poor villages in Uganda under the guise that it cures malaria and giving it to babies. I mean, it's horrifying what's happening. And often also that they claim it can cure the condition of autism, which is also very distressing because parents of autistic kids who are often at their wits' end, there's a lack of support and a lack of care for their children. They turn to bleach thinking that it's a kind of miraculous cure-all for the symptoms that their children are going through. And of course, as the FDA has made clear, it can be life-threatening. It can kill people. There are cases that have been chronicled of deaths. It causes severe dehydration if taken in too high a dosage, which can in itself lead to death. So it's very distressing stuff. We're in an elite club of those who try and expose the lies that are being told on social media about these chemicals. But there are many, many thousands more than us who are following it and actually believe it.
And, it's one thing, Ed, for the Archbishop, as he calls himself, to be pulling this parent scam off. It's another thing for the President of the United States to be publicly suggesting from the White House that perhaps a disinfectant inside ingested could solve the problems with coronavirus. Yes, I mean, that in itself is deeply shocking. I mean, and that's how I got onto the story, because I, like you, have been reporting on Genesis 2 and other peddlers of bleach for about 18 months now. So I'm kind of well attuned to it. And not least, only a week ago, I was reporting on how the FDA had finally taken action. The FDA has been very, very slow to move against Genesis 2. They've allowed them to carry on operating, despite the fact that they
it's been well known that they've been blatantly selling this stuff under false pretenses, under fraudulent guise that it cures all illnesses. And only a week ago, I was reporting that finally the FDA had taken action against Genesis 2 and insisted they stop selling bleach as a cure for COVID-19. They'd actually spotted a main chance and started saying that it also cured COVID-19 and coronavirus, which, talking about cynical acts, that was a very cynical move by the outfit based in Florida. And then suddenly, you get suddenly up pops Trump and makes his speech about disinfectant, and it made me wonder what was going on. And so I looked and talked to my sources, and I looked through the Facebook sites that are out there, and sure enough, came across a recent TV show filmed only on Sunday by Mark Grenon and put out on some obscure social media platform. And about 50 minutes into a 2-hour TV show, you have to be quite dedicated to get to the actual, stuff that's important. He began talking about having written a letter to Donald Trump at the end of last week, following the FDA's move against him. So he was writing to Trump to complain that the Trump administration had taken action against him, and imploring Donald Trump, as someone who understood, the kind of this kind of stuff, imploring him to support them and take counteraction against his own administration. Now, as I say, we don't know for certain whether that reached the president and influenced him, but it's certainly suggestive.
And of course, Grenon's also calling for Dr. Fauci to be fired. He was quick to warn Americans that you don't take bleach or any kind of disinfectant internally. Let me ask you one final question there. You mentioned Alan Keyes, a one-time sort of prominent individual who seems to have signed on with Grenon in some way.
Yes, Alan Keyes also has his own online TV show. It's a sort of weird world out there of very obscure TV shows that you have to know where to find them to sort of track them down. He has his own one on a channel called I Am TV, and he has started actually kind of promoting the Genesis 2 bleach. He has bottles of the bleach on the table in front of the camera. And it's interesting that because Alan Keyes was a main pusher of the birther conspiracy theory that Barack Obama was not born in America. And there's one other person who was the main pusher of that conspiracy theory. Who was that? That was Donald Trump. Alan Keyes was also a 3 times Republican presidential candidate, and Donald Trump was a 1-time victorious presidential candidate for the Republican Party. So there's crossover there. Again, we don't know if there's any connection between Alan Keyes and the president, but it's certainly something worth looking at in further detail and keeping a very beady eye out for. Keyes has actually gone to the extent of traveling himself to Uganda in order to promote the distribution of bleach, industrial bleach, to poor Ugandan villages, which in my mind is extremely shocking.
The whole thing is bizarre, to say the least. Ed, thanks so much for joining. This is something certainly you'll keep an eye on, so we will. Hope to have you back on the program soon.
Yes, let's keep talking. Thanks so much.
And as Ed Pilkington suggested, I've been working on the story of Mark Grenon, the so-called bishop, for several years now, trying to confront him when I worked at ABC News for 2020. And my efforts to question him, the video of that has now gone viral on the internet after it's been revealed his role in this bleacher controversy. Let's take a look at what happened back then.
Are you harming people, do you think, with this, sir?
No.
You're not? Not at all?
No.
And you stand by that this can cure all these diseases?
We cure many things.
And you honestly believe this can cure cancer?
You're an actor, okay?
I'm a reporter.
You're a piece of that they say in Spanish.
But just leave.
Go check out the facts,
busy
okay?
with our church service.
So that's the Bishop Mark Grenon. He did not respond to our request for a comment for today's program. All of this comes as somewhat good news for people who have been trying to stop Grenon's activities, people whose own children may have been harmed by suggestions that this commercial bleach could cure autism. I talked to one of them, Fiona O'Leary in Ireland. Fiona O'Leary, thank you so much for joining us tonight from West Cork, Ireland. Mark Grenon calls himself a bishop and he calls you a witch. Why is that?
Because I have been fighting against his Bleach scam for 7 years now, and we know that Mark Grenon and his cult, the Genesis 2 Church, give bleach to autistic children and to cancer patients, and now COVID-19. So he's not very fond of me. We've banned this in Ireland in 2016, and we intend on banning it all around the world.
And were you surprised to see the President of the United States suggesting that bleach be injected, and that Mark Grenon trying to take credit for that?
Yes and no, because I kind of saw this coming with the Genesis 2 posts over the last few weeks where they were suggesting that Trump would get on board. And they penned a letter to Trump, I believe, last week, which basically was read out on their channel. And I was just absolutely horrified, Brian, to see Trump make these comments on Thursday last, I believe, after all the work that we've done and all the progress that we've made to protect people from this dangerous quackery. It's shocking.
Yet he continues to operate from Florida now. You've been after him for years and years. We've done reports on that. And yet the federal government here has yet to really shut him down.
I find it very upsetting because I believe they're only taking action now because of COVID-19, whereas when we reported them, when they were giving this bleach to autistic children over 7 years, they didn't seem to be interested. But COVID-19 has kind of really made action be a reality. I just hope that they are properly shut down, but they're not the only ones, Brian. There's hundreds of people peddling this bleach around the world, apart from the Grenons, as we speak.
And Fiona, tell me, what began your crusade against the Genesis Church and the bishop and the archbishop?
Back in 2013, I was studying autism in University College Cork, and I have 3 autistic children, so 3 of my 5 children are autistic. I was diagnosed with Asperger's in 2013 as well. And I was told that this group called the Genesis 2 Church coming to Ireland, and they had a miracle cure for autism. I thought it was a joke. And I kind of started investigating and discovered that it was quite strong in Ireland where I live. And I just put everything into it, fighting against this group. But it's been really hard because we haven't had real kind of legislation brought in to protect vulnerable people. So they get prosecuted, but they only get fines. They don't get proper punishment for what they're doing. And I think since Trump has come to power, we're seeing a political support for these quack treatments. Very much the far right are advocating these awful products. So it's got harder to fight this over the last few years as well.
Absolutely. You're exactly right about that. Is there any evidence whatsoever that there's a cure for autism or cancer from the Genesis Church? It seems so ridiculous, but so many people seem to be buying it.
There is no cure for autism because autism is not a disease. It's not a sickness, you know. So even the wording that they use to describe my children is appalling. You know, that they're toxic and they have vaccine injuries and all this nonsense. So it's really disgusting language that's being used, as well as this quackery. And the side effects from this product are deadly. Children are forced to have bleach enemas. They've increased the dosage over the last few years, so children are getting this bleach all day long. It is criminal, you know. I want the government to actually see it in that light, but I think Trump's words have caused damage that can't be reversed. You know, it's gone out there, and we have a lot of Trump supporters in Ireland as well. So it's not just about America being damaged by his words. This is a worldwide issue because he influences the whole world, sadly. So I've seen a lot of people in Ireland supporting this recent comments, and it really hurts me. It hurts me to see Trump do that. I mean, I'm not a fan of Trump, just to let you know that. And but this is the worst thing he's probably done in the quack, you know, the quack kind of area. He's made comments about vaccines in the past, but this is just unbelievable. But it's really shocking because it sounds like he's a member of the Genesis 2 Church when he speaks about this. It's almost like he was given a written script to talk about this last Thursday. So yeah, I think he is talking to these guys, really, you know, for sure.
All right. Well, Fiona O'Leary, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to stay in touch on this as we continue to look at this so-called church that continues to operate right here in the United States. Thanks for being here tonight.
No, thank you so much, Brian. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, as Brian said, we first reported on this story in 2016 when we were at ABC News for 2020. And it's only been last week that the FDA and the Justice Department obtained an injunction that this product called MMS should not be ingested, that it could be very dangerous. So President Trump's remarks this week have revived an investigation and concerns about this phenomena that's been going on for some time. And we really appreciate hearing from Fiona and Ed Perlinsky of The Guardian, who's done a great job in putting the pieces together here. And we'll have more on this as we go forward. Coming up on our program, we are going to turn to another subject here. We are going to talk about cybersecurity in the age of Zoom. And everybody is at home working on your computers if you have them, your iPhones, your iPads, whatever you might be able to cobble together. How secure is your home, working from home on internet? We're going to speak to one of the leading researchers from University of Toronto's Citizen Lab, who first discovered that when you're on Zoom, there might be some other folks listening in on your birthday party. So when we come back, we're going to hear from John Scott Railton, and we will be back with you shortly after this break. Well, welcome back to a special edition of Brian Ross Investigates. And tonight we are going to speak with one of the leading cybersecurity researchers, John Scott Railton, with Citizen Lab of Toronto. John and his colleagues were the first to bring us the news that when you're having a birthday party on Zoom, there might be someone else listening in. John, welcome to the program tonight. And wonder if you can tell for our audience, when you're Zooming at home, what did you find out, first of all, about what's the dangers of being on a Zoom chat?
Well, the research began when my colleague Bill Marzak at the Citizen Lab started looking at what was going on behind the scenes during a Zoom call. And he found something kind of remarkable. Whenever you make a phone call with another person that's supposed to be encrypted, you have to share a key that's used to encrypt that communication. What Bill found was that some of those keys were being retrieved from a server in China, which means, in theory, that if you were having a sensitive communication, it's possible that somebody who controlled that server could listen into what was going on the call. Then he found that the actual contents of the call could also be monitored in a similar way. So this is a very troubling discovery, and it suggested that maybe not a birthday, but if you were talking about, I don't know, say a governmental briefing at Downing Street, you might be being monitored.
And has Zoom responded and tried to fix some of these security issues? What have you heard from Zoom?
So Zoom has absolutely responded to our research and the research that came out of other groups. And Zoom's response has been, I think, fairly positive. They've outlined the number of steps that they want to take to address the problem. Where I think there remains a series of questions has to do with the fact that for a long time, Zoom was telling consumers that the communication was so-called end-to-end encrypted, which would mean that a third party couldn't listen into that communication. It turns out that that wasn't true, and that's still not true. Zoom. Now, they've changed the language that they're providing to consumers about this, but it's still the case that it's not as secure as it was originally marketed as.
And for our viewers at home in general, what are some of the cybersecurity risks if you suddenly find yourself on your home, internet all day long? What should folks be watching out for?
Well, I think it's kind of intuitive to all of us. You may be using a home computer that you're sharing with a family member who has to do homework or prepare a CV. You might also be using an account that's more personal, or your personal phone or your personal device instead of your work device. This has introduced a whole host of new risks that kind of has systems administrators shaking their heads. The problem that we're really seeing is that suddenly this new international mobile work from home operation has presented a lot of new opportunities for hackers to do what they want to do, and many fewer opportunities for the people who want to protect you to actually see what's going on.
John, thank you for being on tonight. We are going to also thank all our folks who are putting this program on the air, working remotely from home. So come join us again next Thursday on the Law&Crime Network.
Thank you so much.